Right outside my studio here, I have built a purpose-built bird garden for my photography. Now recently I discovered something magical is happening inside of it. Find out what it is next. It's late spring here in my part of the world and all the plants in my bird garden are flowering. I've had a lot of birds come and visit my bird garden this year, including the likes of rainbow lorikeets, crested pigeons, brown honeyeaters, noisy miner birds, Lewin's honeyeaters, and my little favourite, superb fairy-wrens. Now one thing I noted about these little superb fairy-wrens, they kept darting back and forth past these windows here. I'd just be sitting here doing something on my laptop or I was doing something with the cameras. And it was just repetitive. They kept darting back and forth, back and forth. So I thought, what in the world is going on here? So I grabbed my Nikon D850 and the Nikon Z7 and I thought I'd go out there and investigate. So what you're about to see, all the stills were taken with the Nikon D850 with the Nikon AFS 80 to 400mm lens, and all the video B-roll was taken with the Nikon Z7 and the Nikon 180 to 600mm lens. The birds were really active this year, mainly because we had a lot of storms in the evenings and they stock up with food from my garden before the rough weather hits. I planted different varieties of native plants so the birds could eat what they would normally find out in the wild in my location. With the superb fairy-wrens, the male is blue and females are brown. Now, as I mentioned, while I was sitting in my studio, I kept noticing the female kept flying back and forth past the windows. Now, on closer inspection, I noticed both of them were collecting something. They were actually building a nest in a callistemon tree. And this is the magical thing. This is the first time since building this bird garden, a bird species has made it their home for nesting. Little tiny twigs, old leaves, and even the odd bit of cobweb. I could almost see her thinking here, this should make for some nice glue-like material for sticking things together. While I was taking video and photos of these little guys, it really did give me a sense of pride and satisfaction that I'd built this bird garden. To not only be able to provide birds with their natural food, but also a place for them to build their nests and a bit of shelter, well, that really is something else. I spent half the day with these little superb fairy-wrens and almost got to the point where I could kind of understand what they were saying to one another. Certain calls to express that there was food over here or there was more building material in this part of the garden. Even I think where the female was telling the male to stay on point and sit on the fence and look out for any sort of danger while she was building the nest. And there was this funny moment that I wanted to share where the female was sitting on the fence and had a little ruffle of her feathers. Now because the fence was smooth from the gloss paint, she kind of like slipped over like she was wearing ice skates. So while I was trained on these superb fairy-wrens, there was this little concerning moment that I was kind of afraid that one of the small brown honeyeaters had died in my garden, but it turned out it was just sunning out its feathers while nestled into the ground. I do see other birds doing this in this one spot in the garden where it gets a lot of sun. It's really nice to think the birds feel safe in the environment I've created for them, feeding, sunning their feathers, and now building their nests. It was a worthwhile project, and I'm so glad all that hard work paid off. It's funny to think those little tiny superb fairy-wrens, their bodies, they measure anywhere from about 4 to 5 centimeters in length, and now I'm going to have little baby fairy-wrens out there flittering about. So when that happens, I'm going to do my very best to capture it with these cameras, and who knows, by then I very well may have my Z50 Mark II camera to go out there and test as well. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Never stop creating, and I'll see you next time.